everybody gather near. The doctor's in the house, so lend him your ear. The things he can say might even make your day. He might even help your pain go away. The doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. I'm sure he can tell you just what to do. The doctor is in the house.
The doctor is in the house. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Ron, host of Dr. Ron, Unfiltered, Uncensored. Happy to be here today and happy and grateful that we have so many listeners. Today we're going to have as a special guest Phil Safier. Phil has been a guest on this program many times, and we will continue our discussion with natural medicine and the fact that you must, and I insist, you be the CEO of your own body. Listen to it and make decisions. Find healthcare providers that you can question, and if they don't give you answers, it's time to move on. And as Dr. Jerry Smith used to say, if they have dead plants in their waiting rooms, it might be a good sign for you to move on. Before we get on with our special guest today, just want to remind you that this series of programs we're doing that we've started a few weeks ago and will continue to do are based on the fact of giving you knowledge that you can use. Okay, and about 4 weeks ago, we actually talked about politics and medicine. Then we talked about our doctors, they're really keeping you healthy. And then Dr. Wong talked a lot about naturopathic versus Rockefeller medicine. And last week we talked about, you have a good doctor today supposedly is one that orders a lot of tests. But if they all come back normal and you still feel like, you're not feeling well, why is that? So we're going to follow that up today with Phil Safier. And then after the holiday in 2 weeks, we'll have a special guest, Dr. Negri. Dr. Negri wrote a book called The Century of Naturopathy. And we'll go through that and find out, more about what Rockefeller did in 1910 when he put that $100 million into destroying what was then a homeopathic and natural medicine. We talked about a Flexner report and how he started the AMA, and then under the restrictions that they put on medical people, the U.S. medical schools in the 19th century there were 400 medical schools in the 19th century. That was by 1910 they knocked that down to 148, and by 1930 they knocked that down to 160. So we'll continue with that. Continue with healing by vibrations and frequencies. And again, what the bottom line is, does your doctor always know what's best? Well, with 85% of doctors now being employed, we have to consider that. When you have medical journals like JAMA and Lancet publishing false articles regarding especially ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine that were written by ghostwriters, you have to start questioning, who are you going to listen to? Well, you're going to listen to your own body. You're going to do your own research. You're going to listen to shows like this one. Maybe you'll sign up for my Telegram page, Doc Ron Unfiltered, where you'll see articles by Dr. McCullough, Dr. Malone, Dr. Tenpenny. So you can make up your own mind what's going on. So enough of that. Let me introduce, I think I have him on the phone, Phil Safier. Phil Safier originally came to us because we were interested in colloidal silver, but he's much more than colloidal silver. Phil has a company, Alexa Limited, and he has lots of products. He has been in this field for over 30 years of treating things naturally to obtain some sort of optimal wellness, treating mind, body, and soul. Okay. And he's brought so much more to our programs besides colloidal silver. He's brought to us the one that I still use today, methylene blue, vinpocetine. And we're going to find out a lot more about Phil Safier today. And Phil, I imagine that's you on the line, and good morning, sir.
Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
I am fine. I mean, fine like wine. It's 10 o'clock here in Naples. What's it, 8 o'clock where you are?
8 o'clock in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I was intrigued when we talked about coming on the program with your note to me that stated we need to learn to listen to our bodies. Okay, that's been our message for the past few weeks. Although it's been our message for 6 years on this podcast, more so now than ever when we were being abused and used and schooled and fooled by the so-called experts. And ladies and gentlemen, boy, whenever you hear the science is settled, run the other way, run for the exit, because it's never settled. So Phil, you have some comments. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself first, and then tell us your thoughts on natural healing.
Great. First of all, I think you said I'm a doctor. I'm not. I just play one on the internet, so let's make that clear.
I do.
So, as you said, I've been involved with natural healing and alternatives to standard pharmaceuticals and allopathic medicine for most of my life. And at this point, I'm 77, in excellent health. I take no pharmaceutical medications. I exercise. I do Tai Chi. And one of the things that I've learned actually fairly recently during this last few years is the importance of the breath. And I'd like to go into that in more detail. But before I do that, I'd really like to address what you were talking about. You were saying that we need to listen to our bodies, and absolutely that's correct. And we need to understand what that really means and how to listen to our body. But beyond that, we need to understand about not listening to some of these false prophets and sham scientists and their faulty research. So we have to learn to discriminate. We have to learn to think critically. And in this time, we're undergoing a crisis of confidence and of meaning. And we're actually participating in a con game. And the con is part of confidence. So a confidence game is a con game. And people try to get your confidence in order to sell you something. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not so good. So we have to learn to think critically. And I want to advocate for skepticism. People sometimes think that skepticism is negative, like cynicism. Skepticism is not cynicism. Skepticism is science. It's a scientific method. So I'd like to put out a thought here that we're not as smart as we think we are, and we're also not as dumb. And we're smart enough to get into trouble, but often we're not smart enough to get out of trouble. And that's where we find ourselves. We're very smart on many levels. Technically, we're very smart, but we're not as smart as we think we are, and we're also not emotionally smart. There's an actual index like IQ, and it's called EQ, which is the emotional quotient. And they've found that on average, Americans in particular have an EQ of around 10 years of age. So we have to be real careful when we listen to people and ask ourselves several questions. One is, how smart are these people? How good is their research? Peer-reviewed, and who reviews the peers? And we want to ask ourselves, who benefits? When they tell us things, Do they have conflicting interests? So we need to be able to think for ourselves, and that's really what's lacking in education these days, that more and more people don't think for themselves. They follow, they obey. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that they're afraid. Anxiety is the real epidemic. That's the pandemic, is anxiety. Because fear, as Herbert said in Dune, fear is the mind slayer. So you have to learn how to reduce your anxiety, and that will help you to think clearly. And when in doubt, don't act. Stop. Have some patience. Wait. Remember, there's three things that happen when you're confronted with a threat. You can fight, you can flee, or you can freeze. And sometimes freezing is the best thing to do, is just to stop. And in order to stop, you need to get into the parasympathetic part of the nervous system and get out of fight or flight and get into the Zen, the chill state. And in order to do this, the best way to do this is to learn how to breathe properly. And that's what I'd like to go into, if you'll permit me to start on that.
That would be great. I mean, I love the analogy to get into or the thought to get into the sympathetic nervous system, because we are living in a state of being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but there's no tiger. So
that's right. So we want to get into we want to get into the parasympathetic, and I'd like to start this explanation about the importance of breath by saying that learning to breathe properly is, in my opinion, the most important health lesson you can learn. We're always breathing. In fact, we are the breath. And if you think about it just a little bit, you realize that you can go without food for a long time, a month, 2 months, people say. You can go without water, a week maybe, something like that. But without air, I don't know how many minutes you can last without air, but it's not very long. So we have to breathe. We're always breathing, but we're not always breathing correctly. And the best thing about learning how to breathe properly and to help yourself is, first of all, it's free. There's no charge to learn this. You need no equipment. You can do this anytime, any place, anywhere, and everyone can do it. And when I talk about breathing properly, I'm talking about breathing through the nose. Nasal breathing, what we're meant to do for a number of reasons. When you breathe through your nose, and I'm talking about both inhaling and exhaling through the nose, there's several things that happen. Number one is you're filtering the incoming air. When you inhale through your mouth, there's no filtration there, very little. But when you breathe in through your nose, you're filtering the air, you're humidifying the air, you're warming the incoming air. You're increasing the airflow, oxygen flow to arteries, veins, and nerves. You slow down your breath. You improve the volume of your lungs. Your diaphragm works better. It works properly. So these are just some of the benefits of nasal breathing. And I'd like to go into a few of the techniques that a person can use. Also, I should say that I've written up some of these notes at the website. So if people want to go to Elixa, ELIXA.com/breath, BREATH, breath, they'll see more information on this. And there's a lot of good resources on this. There's a book by James Nestor called Breath, which I highly recommend. It's available as an ebook, or you can buy a hard copy of it. There's also an audio version of it, so you can just listen to it while you're walking or do something else. I highly recommend his book. He goes into this in great depth, and it's just a fabulous resource. And then also you can go on to YouTube and just type in breathing techniques and nasal breathing, and you'll see lots and lots of people talking about ways that you use breath. So I'll go into a few of these techniques. First of all, as I said, you want to only breathe through your nose with rare exceptions. And I might add that this has a very, very long tradition. In fact, the American Indians, there were tribes that would watch their infants sleeping, and if the infant was breathing through its mouth, they would gently close the infant's mouth and get it to breathe through its nose. They would even go so far as to tell their children that if they breathed through their mouth, evil spirits would enter into them and cause them problems. So they understood the importance of nasal breathing. So you're breathing in through your nose and you're breathing out through your nose. One of the things that this does is it increases nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide is one of the most important chemicals that we have in our body. You can increase this by eating beets. There's a lot of ways. Arginine, things like this will increase your nitric oxide intake. But you can do this by yourself by breathing nasally. And one of the tricks to increase nitric oxide production is to hum while you exhale. And the research actually shows that the ideal frequency for this is 130 cycles per second. Kind of like that. And you can find out 130 cycles. Again, there are YouTube videos that give you this sound. And as you exhale through the nose, you increase nitric oxide production by a factor of 15. Not 15%, but 15 times. You get 15 times more nitric oxide in your system. And this helps actually the cells use oxygen. When you're breathing through your mouth, panting, you're going up a hill, you're running, you're getting more air in, but the truth of the matter is you're not getting as much oxygen where it needs to go into the cells. So when you breathe nasally, you're increasing your oxygen uptake. You can actually measure this. And another thing that happens when you breathe nasally is that you're creating a back pressure in your lungs, which helps to expand your lungs. Another technique that I like very much is as you inhale, you want to expand the rib cage. If you expand your rib cage, you're doing a couple of things. Number one, you can actually take in more air than if you belly breathe or if you chest breathe. People talk about belly breathing all the time, but there's a kind of a mistake there because you don't actually want to expand your belly as much as you want to expand your rib cage. Another benefit of doing this is that you increase the rib mobility, which is very, very important. And stuck ribs can have a lot of damaging effects. So you want to, again, open up those ribs, get them moving properly. So that's another technique that you can do. Another technique is that, and this is especially good for stress reduction, and again, getting into the parasympathetic, is that make your exhales longer than your inhale. The Navy SEALs and a lot of these elite armed forces have a technique that they call box breathing, which is very, very simple. And basically what you do is you inhale, again, through the nose for 4 seconds. You hold the breath for 4 seconds. Exhale, again, through the nose for 4 seconds. Hold the breath for 4 seconds, and then repeat the cycle. Inhale for 4 seconds. So the box breathing, done just a few times. It doesn't take a lot of time to do this. A few of these repetitions, again, will put you into the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, get you into the flow state, keep you relaxed and ready for whatever you have to do, whether it's athletic or martial arts, anything that you have to do. Talking to your spouse when they're angry and you're angry. All these things. It's remarkable how you can use your breath to get your nervous system calmed down to where you're more rational and you can think in a sane manner instead of losing your stuff. And so there's so many benefits. I could go on and on about the importance of nasal breathing. But to me, in all the years that I've been involved with alternative health methods, it's kind of surprising that I overlooked the most effective, simplest, least expensive way to improve your health. So that's kind of the summation of where I wanted to go with this talk today. And it's so remarkable that right in front of us, the one thing that we've been neglecting all this time and teaching our children is the importance of the breath. And of course, this knowledge goes back thousands and thousands of years. People knew these things probably because they didn't have a lot of distractions. They could focus on their breath.
And they were not raised in a society that practiced a pill for an ill.
Exactly.
They learned to do it naturally. Well, another thing that breathing does, it also keeps your mouth shut. So if there is a problem at home, you won't make it worse.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But this vagus nerve stimulation is something that we have not spent enough time on. I agree with you.
Yes.
Right, because if you can stimulate, what's the number one cause of chronic disease? It's inflammation.
Yes.
Right, and the vagus nerve can dampen the effect of inflammation and inflammatory diseases like irritable bowel and rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes.
So I applaud you for bringing this subject up because we have talked about acupuncture and vagus nerve. I had one guest that mentioned just in a sentence about Tai Chi, but most of them rely on or promoting a product like beetroot juice and other multivitamins and so forth. But here we have it, like you said, this is free.
It's free. Now, it's interesting that you raise that because in Tai Chi, especially the form that I do, which is very rare, it's called Tibetan Tai Chi. It was brought over by a true grandmaster from Indonesia. One of the we do inhale through the nose, and we are instructed to keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth. And this is very important. And in fact, you may know this already, but you can go on again to YouTube and you learn about an orthodontist, actually 3 generations of orthodontists who got away from using braces and teaching people to breathe properly through their nose and to keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth. It reshapes the mouth and the teeth. So, again, we teach this at all. Keeping the tongue on the roof of the mouth also it completes an energetic circuit in the body that's very helpful. Another thing that we do that's incredibly powerful is to visualize the flow of the breath. So in our forms, we're instructed to visualize the air coming in through the nose, going up over the front of the face, up over the head, down back, down the spine, down in and up into the dantian, as it's called, under the belly button. And then as you exhale, you visualize the breath coming up and out that way. Now, one of the things you can do with visualizing the breath is to direct the flow of breath, energy, chi, whatever you like, into an area that needs blood flow. So, for instance, if you're hiking and your legs are tired, if as you breathe in, you imagine that breath going down into your thighs, into your quads, into your calves, you will actually notice right away, not days later, but right away, you'll notice that your legs are more energetic, that they have more energy, that they're less sore. And this goes for any part of the body. You can imagine, you can visualize this energy. If you like, you can think of it as oxygen, again, or energy itself. You can actually direct it with your mind. And again, this is not woo-woo. This is you can actually measure this with instruments. You can measure blood flow with a number of different ways. There are biofeedback devices for the head, for instance. If you had a head injury or stroke or something like this, you can actually imagine blood flow going to that area, and you can measure that there's an actual increase in blood flow.
And you're right. There's a lot of positive effects from the breath. And
yes.
you mentioned nitric oxide, and I had a note here. It's funny, I had it just in front of me that there was a Nobel Prize given for the discovery of that molecule in 1998. And to keep our listeners interested in nitric oxide and breath, it may help guys and gals with their sexual function. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So, I mean,
yes.
don't forget. If you need a reason to breathe and you're having a little problem, you might want to take more interest in that breath and do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And again, we're talking about arginine, eating beets, et cetera, all these things will improve erectile dysfunction and things like that, because that's the real problem is blood flow. You need blood to make Mr. Happy happy.
Right, and to get that blood down there, you want your arteries to open up wide, and the breath by stimulating nitric oxide is a good answer for you, ladies and gentlemen. And another reason, so you finish that, please.
Yeah, well, there's actually a nitric oxide spray that you can inhale that's again preventative for all these airborne viruses and various conditions that are going around, which is a great thing. However, again, you don't need to buy anything. Again, if you will inhale through your nose and exhale, you're increasing nitric oxide production. And if you hum while you exhale, again, a 15-fold increase in nitric oxide production. So there you have it. You keep saying, listen to your body. Okay, and it's absolutely the best advice there is. And by paying attention to the breath, we're really listening to the body. If you really want to listen to the body, pay attention to your breathing. It's so simple. It requires some focus. It's something you have to work on. It actually takes about a month to develop a new habit like this. But if you practice it, and you don't have to do it constantly, but the more you practice it, the faster it will become more of an automatic thing that you will breathe through your nose. Another thing that I wanted to raise here is that some people will say, I can't breathe through my nose. I need surgery to open up. No, you don't need surgery. It's very rare that you actually need a surgical intervention for just about anything, unless you break something. But you can open up those passages through breath work. It's very possible to open up these clogged airways naturally. So don't think just because you have a hard time breathing through your nose that you'll never be able to. That's just not true. That's a myth. And they've done incredible work with people with all kinds of really dire medical conditions that had no particular treatment. But when they taught people to breathe nasally, they got better.
Well, again, you really hit a home run with this topic, because I have in my notes about nitric oxide. Decreases blood clot likelihood. So what have we seen with the Chinese virus? A lot of clotting,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
We talked about erectile dysfunction, brain health, your immune system boost by breathing and increasing nitric oxide, your performance in all ways, not only in bed but athletically. And one more in my notes is anti-aging. Okay,
yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons to be conscious of your breath. And then I have one other question. I have a lot of questions now that you brought this subject up. I didn't know where we were going. How about the Iceman, Jim Hoff?
Wim Hof, yeah. Wim Hof.
William Huff, yeah. Is his breathing techniques any different? Because I have not studied it. Any different than what you would do with Tai Chi or?
Yeah, he's taking a different approach. He's getting more air in. He does hyperventilation, where you're actually huffing and puffing for an amount of time, and then on the final, I think it's like 30. You do 30 inhales and exhales, deep and fairly rapid, and at the end of the last breath, you exhale and you hold it. And it's pretty amazing, because you can hold your breath easily for a minute or 2 minutes. It's pretty amazing, because you've got this tremendous amount of oxygen in your system. What I'm talking about, what James Nestor in the book Breath talks about, is that actually what you want to do is you want to decrease the amount of oxygen. You want to increase the amount of CO2. Everybody thinks CO2 is a bad thing, carbon dioxide. It's actually very, very important. And again, Nestor explains the mechanism of why we want to increase CO2, and you want to learn to tolerate this increase of CO2. If you get enough CO2 in you, you'll start to panic. You'll feel like, oh, my God, I'm about to die. I'm going to asphyxiate. Actually, the more you can learn to tolerate that feeling, and there's ways that you do this. There's a whole technique called Buteyko breathing, which you can look up, which gives you simple exercises that help you increase your CO2 content. So, for instance, say you exercise real hard one day. You know, in a day or two, you're going to start to hurt from this. Well, it turns out that if you, after you exercise, if you sit down and you do the Buteyko technique of very shallow breathing, it takes a number of minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes, you increase your CO2 levels, which actually increases your output of positive hydrogen ions. And the hydrogen is obviously the ultimate antioxidant. When it hits oxygen, it creates water, H2O. So by increasing your CO2 content, your carbon dioxide content, you're actually decreasing inflammation. So you can do this again through breathing. You can also drink carbonated water. So who knew that drinking seltzer is actually a terrific thing? All those people in New York who used to get, along with their milk deliveries, bottles of seltzer water.
You got that. I remember that.
Yeah, and it actually turns out that drinking carbonated water, without sugar, of course, just carbonated water, is actually very good for you. So we have to come to terms with carbon dioxide and not think of it as a poison or a problem. It's actually a beneficial thing. So that's one of the differences between the nasal breathing concept and Wim Hof's technique. Wim Hof's techniques of hyper oxygenation and ventilation, it's very useful. You can get into some very interesting states by doing this. It's kind of almost like taking DMT or something like that. It's psychedelic in ways. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of benefits to what he does, but it's actually another a different approach to this, and it's not something that you do moment to moment every day, 24/7. What I'm talking about is you want to be breathing nasally as much as you can, as often as you can, meaning all day long. And the more you do this, the more benefit you get out of it. By the way, parenthetically, one of the things that Wim Hof advocates is cryotherapy. And you can start doing this by taking cold showers and things like that. So the improvement in your immune system is tremendous if you do cold therapy. It really helps the body. So I like Wim Hof a lot, but we're talking about a different approach to breath.
Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the word inflammation a few times today, and I think Mr. Safier would agree that one of the things we talked about, Phil, is earthing. So while you're walking on the beach or walking on grass and do the breathing, you're getting more than your money's worth, right?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, there are actually shoes that are designed to create that circuit. They're actually conductive soles, and especially if you wear these shoes. So you don't necessarily have to go barefoot. There's places where you don't want to go barefoot, but you can still earth. You can still ground yourself with special shoes. But basically, if you go out and stand on the ground, grass or whatever, for 20 minutes, you're discharging all these, things that, these electrical buildups and charges that you don't want in your body. And then there's also, for your bed, there are pillowcases and sheets and things that have silver impregnated in them so that they're conductive. And then you attach this to the bottom pole on your outlet, your wall outlet. You have to be careful when you do this. But if your house is properly grounded, and there's ways to check for this, just by plugging your sheet or your pillowcase into that bottom third socket there, and not the upper two, you can ground yourself while you sleep. So yeah, it's a tremendous technique.
Yeah, and that thing. That's Clint Ober. And I don't know. Do you have them on your website, or is that just like from earthing?
No. It's very simple, really. And you can buy all kinds of grounding straps. Grounding straps have been used forever for electronics technicians to keep them from shorting out circuitry. So they'll wear a little wrist strap that they plug into something that's grounded. And those are very inexpensive. You can use. You can make them. I mean, it's you can make one for $1, really. Just take a piece of wire and again plug it into that third pole. Again,
in fact,
not all of those are actually grounded to the earth, though. So you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I bought that plug that checks it. And in fact, I'm sitting here with my bare feet on a mat right now because I feel so much better when I'm grounded.
Yeah, absolutely, and everything. And again, the breath work grounds you. That's a way of grounding. Also, is to breathe properly.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this has been really informative, and since you have been on the last time, Phil, we've discovered that somewhere around 35 to 40 minutes, most of our listeners will stay tuned. After that, they switch off, I guess, because they get off their exercise bike or treadmill or what have you, or that's enough walking for the day. But I have learned a lot today. I have learned a lot. I'm so happy. I mean, with an attitude of gratitude, I thank you for bringing this topic up because it's not something that I think I would have done in the course of planning for programs. So I want to thank you a lot.
Great. And if I could just kind of make a closing statement here and tie it back to this original topic of how do we know what we know? How do we know who to trust? And again, what you said, listen to the body. If you learn to pay attention to your breath, it will help you become independent and self-reliant. You will have more confidence, more ease, more relaxation, and you will be able to think clearly. And when people are trying to blow smoke up you know where, you'll realize it. And you'll begin to say, wait a second, is this real or is this not real? And you'll become a more intelligent, more discriminating consumer of information. And that's our problem today. There's lots and lots of problems, but I think the overarching problem is how do we know what we know? And this goes not only for externally, but ourselves. Ask yourself, when you have a thought, does that thought make any sense? I'm amazed if you pay attention, if you observe your thoughts, you begin to realize that some huge percentage of what you think is absolute nonsense. You know, right. And question yourself. Realize that the inside and the outside are not two different things. It's all one thing. It's all connected, and you got to learn again who you are, how you operate, and what's real and what's not real. And I'm telling you, the breath is the key. It's the key that unlocks all the doors.
Well, this is definitely worthwhile, ladies and gentlemen, because, you know, we want to get away from the mentality of a pill for every ill. And you're not healthy because the pills are masking the symptoms. You say, well, I feel good, but I'm taking 4 different pills a day from my doctor. That's not health in my opinion. So this might be, you know, in addition to everything else we're talking about this month and how to think about your medical providers, your healthcare providers, the fact that even today with so many physicians being employed and reimbursements going down, I think natural medicine, the real medicine is going to be under more and more of an attack. They're going to try and limit it because, or take it over and blend it into the pill for ill model. So you must, like Mr. Safier says, like Phil says, think for yourself. Have a critical thinking about everything. And just know when you start hearing negative reports about vitamins, no one has shown anybody a body yet, because as of the 37th annual report from the American Association of Poison Control Centers, 0 death from any vitamin. Okay,
right.
So don't, you know, they're demonizing melatonin now. Well, right? Did you see that? They're demonizing it because they're not making any money with their Zoloft and so forth.
Right.
So,
yeah, we're in a real pickle here. We need to think for ourselves, and just again, my religion is skepticism. It's an old philosophical school, goes back to the Greeks, and it's one of the wisdom schools is skepticism. Be skeptical. It's scientific. The scientific method is the skeptic's method.
Good advice. You know what? Let's end with that, and let's end with a promise to our visitors that we'll continue this next month. Are you on board for that, Phil?
Absolutely, and I appreciate what you're doing, and stay the course. You're doing a great service, Dr. Ron.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and we need to have more discussions like this. That's why I'm having Dr. Negri on. He's written a gorgeous book about natural healing, but they're under attack now. They're under attack. Chiropractic is under attack again. So we have to keep giving you the facts, and you make your own decision. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. I want to thank Mr. Safier. His website is Elixa, ELIXA.com. I personally and my family are using his colloidal silver maker, and I don't know how he makes any money from it because I purchased it about 3 years ago, and it's still making 10 parts per million with those silver rods. You must have you're making them too well. But in any case, take a look at that, Alexa.com, and just take a look. If you're on my mailing list for future shows, take a look. Open that email up from MailChimp, and you'll see when Phil's going to be back on. So again, Phil, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Doctor. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody, Dr. Ron's finished for today. I hope you got some good wisdom for what the man had to say. If it's all about good health, he's the man you got to see. He has a lot more answers for you. So tune in next week when the doctor is in the house. Or when the doctor is in the house. And let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. I'm sure he can tell you just what to do. The doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house. So if you have a pain, call the doctor. If you have a strain, call the doctor. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house. The doctor is in the house. See you next week.